Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Nymphadora Tonks appeared in Harry Potter quite late, only in the 5th book, but still managed to win immense love from fans. She also appears in the films, and her portrayal was transferred fairly well. Her cheerful personality, ability to change her appearance at will, bravery, and skilled magic made her a vivid heroine. But as often happens, Warner Brothers left out many interesting details we know from the books. Let's go through the most curious facts that film-only viewers might not know. Enjoy watching. Number 1, she almost lost her husband. After the events of the 6th book, Tonks and Remus Lupin secretly married. For her, it was the event of a lifetime, but Lupin soon began wavering. He came to Harry, Ron, and Hermione offering to join their dangerous mission, essentially abandoning his wife. Harry harshly scolded his teacher, accusing him of cowardice and reminding him that James Potter would never have done such a thing. After that conversation, Remus stayed with Tonks, and rightly so. Number 2, she became a mother. The story with Remus continued. They had a son, the adorable Teddy Lupin. At first, his father wanted to run away not only from his wife, but also from the child, but eventually chose to stay. At a gathering in Bill and Fleur's house, the couple asked Harry to become the boy's godfather. For the chosen one, it was a tremendous honor, even if he worried whether he could handle such responsibility. Number 3. Her mentor was Alastair Moody. The path of becoming an Auror wasn't easy. Tonks admitted she nearly failed the stealth and tracking exam, but her persistence saved her. Her mentor was none other than Alastair Moody, the legendary Auror and true hunter of dark wizards. Despite his paranoia and harsh character, he shaped her into a real fighter. Throughout the story, Tonks repeatedly proved that she had learned his lessons well. Number 4, she, not Luna, saved Harry on the train. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry decided to spy on Draco by hiding under the invisibility cloak. But Malfoy noticed something strange, immobilized him, and broke his nose. In the film, Luna comes to the rescue, but in the book, it was Tonks who saved him. She fixed his nose and helped him get back to school, so Harry owes it to her that he wasn't left lying on the train floor. Number 5. She tricked the Dursleys. After the Dementor attack on Harry and Dudley, the Dursleys left, abandoning the boy. In the film, this looks like coincidence, but in reality, Tonks was behind it. She sent them a fake letter through Muggle Post claiming their lawn had made the shortlist for the All England Best-Kept Suburban Lawn competition. Vernon, Petunia, and Dudley, flattered by the news, went away, and at that very moment, the Order of the Phoenix came to pick up Harry. Number 6. She guarded the prophecy. During the events of the 5th book, Arthur Weasley was attacked by Nagini. The films only showed him, but in the books, all Order members, including Tonks, were involved in guarding the prophecy. If the snake had chosen another day for the attack, she could have been the victim. Afterward, together with Moody and other Order members, Tonks visited Arthur at St. Mungo's Hospital. Number 7. She wasn't a prefect, a cut detail that brings Tonks closer to Harry. In the books, Harry felt upset that the prefect badges went to Ron and Hermione, not him. Tonks comforted him, saying she hadn't been made prefect either, due to her lack of ability to behave. Moreover, she told him that his father James and Sirius had also never been prefects. Those words reassured Harry and helped him accept the situation. Though the films portrayed Tonks as a lively and charming heroine, the books reveal much more about her. Her playful spirit was combined with loyalty to the cause, a readiness to take risks, and great love for her family. That's why fans still cherish her, and regret that the screen version showed only part of this remarkable witch. Number 8. Her Patronus changed because of love. When Harry first sees Tonks's Patronus in Half-Blood Prince, he is startled. Instead of a simple, playful shape, it is a large, four-legged creature. He mistakes it for a wolf. The connection is obvious, though unspoken. Her love for Remus Lupin has reshaped her very magic. As Kingsley Shacklebolt explains, the Patronus is a reflection of your innermost feelings, and Tonks's feelings were no longer hidden. What makes it even more intriguing is the mystery of her original Patronus. Rowling never tells us what it used to be, leaving fans to wonder. Was it something light-hearted, perhaps as playful as her personality, or something entirely different, now erased by love? The fact that her Patronus changed at all is rare in the wizarding world, a magical sign that her devotion to Remus was strong enough to alter the deepest part of her soul. Number 9. She was a proud Hufflepuff. Tonks belonged to Hufflepuff, though the films never mention it. Under Professor Sprout's guidance, she grew up in a house built on loyalty, kindness, and hard work. Those values shaped her far more than family tradition ever could. The Sorting Hat's choice makes sense when we look at her life. She was never interested in glory or ambition. She cared about people, and she stood by them no matter the cost. Her loyalty shows most clearly in her devotion to Remus Lupin. Even when he tried to push her away, convinced he was unworthy, she refused to leave him. In Half-Blood Prince, she declares, "You see, he would rather leave me than risk making me unhappy, and he makes me miserable by doing it." That persistence, that refusal to abandon someone she loved, is the essence of Hufflepuff. It was not stubbornness for its own sake, but the deep belief that love and loyalty are worth the fight. Hufflepuff often stands in the shadow of Gryffindor and Slytherin, yet Tonks is proof of its strength. She was an Auror, a soldier in the Order, and one of the brightest Metamorphmagi of her age. Behind the pink hair and clumsy spills was a heart that embodied her house's quiet courage. She showed that Hufflepuff did not produce followers, but fighters who carried their values into battle. Number 10. Family ties with the Malfoys and Lestrange. Tonks was born into the ancient House of Black through her mother Andromeda. That made her the niece of Bellatrix Lestrange and Narcissa Malfoy. The connection is easy to forget because Tonks herself never embraced the family's obsession with blood purity. But the family tree in Order of the Phoenix spells it out. She and Draco Malfoy were cousins. The irony is sharp. Draco was raised as a symbol of pure blood pride, while Tonks became an Auror, openly fighting everything the Malfoys stood for. This family divide came to life during the war. Bellatrix mocked her own niece without hesitation. At the Burrow, she sneered at Tonks for marrying Remus Lupin, calling him the werewolf. It was not just cruelty, it was betrayal of their family's standards. And yet Tonks never flinched. In Half-Blood Prince, her grief shows in her dimmed hair, but her choices remain firm. She chose love, she chose the Order, she chose a different kind of legacy than the one Bellatrix or Narcissa wanted. The contrast between Tonks and Draco is especially striking. While he was forced into Voldemort's service and burdened with fear, Tonks risked her life in the Order of the Phoenix. They shared the same bloodline but lived as if from two different worlds. Her very existence undermines the ideology of her relatives. Tonks proves that family ties do not dictate destiny, and that rebellion against tradition can be an act of courage in itself. Number 11, she was a natural Metamorphmagus. Tonks's most striking gift was not her skill with a wand, but her birthright as a Metamorphmagus. Unlike Animagi, who must endure years of training, she was born with the ability to change her appearance at will. In Order of the Phoenix, she entertains Harry by transforming her nose into a pig snout, then into a duck's bill. "I was never much good at disguises the normal way," she laughs, "so this comes in handy." It is a moment of humor, but it also shows the rare power she carries. For the Ministry of Magic, this gift made her invaluable. As an Auror, Tonks could slip into disguises without Polyjuice Potion or complicated spells. Moody himself comments on her usefulness in surveillance and undercover work. Her clumsiness might have made her a less-than-perfect stalker, but her ability to become unrecognizable in a heartbeat gave her a huge advantage over most dark wizards. Few in Voldemort's ranks could match that kind of talent. The gift also became a part of her personality. Changing her hair color daily from bubblegum pink to shocking violet was not only fun, but an act of rebellion against the stiff traditions of her family. In the darkest times, however, the ability faltered. In Half-Blood Prince, when she is heartbroken over Remus, her hair turns mousy brown and refuses to brighten again. The state of her gift mirrors her inner turmoil, a physical reflection of her emotions. Her son Teddy Lupin inherits the same power. In the epilogue of Deathly Hallows, Harry sees Teddy at King's Cross Station, his hair changing from turquoise to bright purple as he kissed Victoire. This passing of the torch is more than a genetic quirk. It ties Teddy to the mother he never knew, a living reminder of Tonks's rare magic and the joy she brought into even the darkest of wars. Number 12. She fell in the Battle of Hogwarts. Tonks's final chapter comes in the Battle of Hogwarts, and it is one of the most heartbreaking turns in the story. She has just become a mother, yet when the call to arms comes, she leaves her newborn son Teddy in the care of her mother Andromeda. Rowling writes, Tonks had rushed to the castle when she heard the news, leaving her baby behind. It was a choice that showed both her love for Remus and her determination to stand with the Order in its darkest hour. Her death is tied cruelly to family. It is Bellatrix Lestrange, her own aunt, who strikes her down. The symmetry is chilling. The niece who rejected the Black family's pure blood ideals falls to the same relative who embodied them most viciously. Bellatrix had already killed Sirius, and now she adds Tonks to her list. In the same battle, Remus Lupin is killed by Antonin Dolohov, leaving Teddy an orphan before his first birthday. The book does not linger on the duel, but its silence makes the loss heavier. Harry finds their bodies together in the Great Hall. Remus and Tonks, pale and still, both lying side by side as though asleep. The image is stark. Two warriors united in life and death, sacrificed for the fight against Voldemort. The films reduce this to a brief shot, but in the book, the discovery of their bodies lands like a stone in the chest. Tonks's decision to fight even as a mother defines her legacy. She could have stayed behind, hidden, or clung to her child. Instead, she chose courage, even knowing the risk. That choice leaves her son Teddy in the same place Harry once stood, an orphan, shaped by war but surrounded by love. It is a bitter echo, but also a testament to her spirit. She was never one to stand in the shadows, and she met her end as she lived on the front lines. Number 13, Seven Potters, her duel in the sky. The Battle of the Seven Potters is one of the most chaotic moments in the series, and Tonks is right in the middle of it. She flies with Ron on a broom, disguised as Harry, and immediately comes under attack from Death Eaters. In Deathly Hallows, the text makes it clear that the sky was alive with curses, red and green and purple jets of light, flashing in every direction. It is here that Tonks shows she is not simply comic relief, but a fighter of true skill. Her duel with Bellatrix Lestrange stands out. J.K. Rowling writes that Tonks and her husband had both been forced to break off their pursuit of a pair of Death Eaters after Bellatrix herself had joined the chase. Bellatrix was no ordinary opponent. She had killed Sirius, tortured Neville's parents, and revelled in cruelty. Facing her in mid-air at night while carrying a disguised Ron was the kind of fight that could have ended in disaster. Tonks still pressed forward. The danger was real. She was targeted directly, and the book leaves no doubt that she barely escaped alive. Ron describes later how close they had come to being blasted out of the sky. This is important because the films almost erase her role in this operation. In the movie version, Tonks is barely seen, and her duel with Bellatrix is omitted entirely. Readers, however, get to see her bravery tested against one of Voldemort's most dangerous followers. Her survival and safe arrival at the Burrow prove her place on the front lines. She was not hiding behind Moody or Kingsley, she was taking fire herself and keeping Ron alive. In that sense, the episode reinforces her character. Tonks was never meant to be a background figure. She was an Auror, a member of the Order of the Phoenix, and someone who risked her life openly, even if the films only gave us glimpses of that truth. Number 14. She hated the name Nymphadora. From the very first moment she appeared in the story, Tonks made her feelings about her full name clear. When she introduced herself to Harry in Order of the Phoenix, she quickly said, "Don't call me Nymphadora." Her tone was sharp, almost playful, but it left no room for argument. To her, the name sounded stiff, pretentious, and far too long for someone with her quick humour and restless energy. She preferred the simple Tonks, short and snappy, a name that fit her unpredictable nature. This dislike became something of a running joke. Characters like Mad-Eye Moody and even Harry respected her wish, avoiding Nymphadora unless they wanted to see her wince. J.K. Rowling uses these moments to highlight her rebellious streak. Unlike the aristocratic traditions of her pure-blood family, Tonks chose to define herself on her own terms. She wasn't going to carry a name that sounded like it belonged in an old family tapestry rather than on the lips of a young Auror who could trip over her own feet one second and duel Death Eaters the next. Yet there was one exception. Remus Lupin, the man she loved, sometimes called her Dora. What would have sounded unbearably formal from anyone else felt tender and intimate from him. That small shortening carried warmth, not weight. In Half-Blood Prince, when Tonks appears at Christmas looking pale and troubled, it is Remus who uses her name softly, reminding readers that behind her constant jokes and bright hair, she longed for closeness like anyone else. The contrast between her loud rejection of Nymphadora and her quiet acceptance of Dora tells us more about her than a dozen action scenes. The way Tonks handled her name became symbolic. Refusing Nymphadora was her way of pushing back against the old pure-blood ideals her family tried to uphold. Accepting Dora from Remus was her way of letting someone see the softer, hidden side of herself. A single name showed the two halves of her story, the rebellious fighter with pink hair and the vulnerable young woman who wanted love and belonging. Number 15. Injury in the Department of Mysteries. Of all the characters who walked into the heart of danger alongside Harry Potter in the Department of Mysteries, few left as complex an impression as Nymphadora Tonks. Most readers first encounter her as the clumsy but cheerful young Auror who could shift her hair colour at will and make Molly Weasley's children laugh during dark times. She is presented as light-hearted, almost comic relief in a story increasingly overshadowed by Voldemort's return. Yet hidden behind that bright exterior was a professional fighting on the front line of the war. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries revealed this reality, and her injury there is one of the lesser discussed but important moments that shows the true cost of her involvement. The night at the Ministry was a carefully constructed trap. Harry had been lured there through visions planted by Voldemort, and the Order of the Phoenix rushed to protect him and his friends when they walked into a room full of Death Eaters. Tonks was among those who arrived to fight. Readers might remember Sirius Black dueling his cousin Bellatrix Lestrange, or Dumbledore arriving at the last moment, but Tonks's battle is less vividly described. Still, J.K. Rowling carefully notes that she was one of the first to fall. This subtle detail matters. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the line reads, "And Harry saw Tonks fighting an unknown Death Eater. A jet of red light struck her, and she fell heavily onto the floor." It was not glamorous, not heroic in the cinematic sense, but sudden and brutal. It reminded readers that the Order's members, even the young and energetic ones, could be cut down quickly. This detail hits harder when you recall the build-up to that night. Tonks had been introduced as a Metamorphmagus, constantly changing her hair into bubblegum pink or shocking violet. She joked about her clumsiness at Grimmauld Place, toppling over an umbrella stand and being teased for her inability to cook. She was easy to underestimate. Harry, like the reader, saw her first as comic relief, someone to lighten the tense atmosphere of the Order's meetings. But the Department of Mysteries stripped away that illusion. She was not there to play, she was there to fight, facing highly trained death. Eaters, she took the same risk as the veterans, Mad-Eye Moody, Kingsley Shacklebolt and Sirius, and paid the same price in blood. Tonks's fall is particularly striking because of how early it comes in the battle. Other members of the Order fought through multiple chambers, chasing Death Eaters through the Hall of Prophecy and into the Death Chamber itself, but Tonks was already out of the fight. Her injury is not dwelled upon, yet the fact that she remained incapacitated until the conflict was over tells us the severity. Rowling leaves readers to imagine the nature of the injury, and perhaps intentionally so. Was it a stunner that knocked her out? Or was it something worse, a curse that required weeks of healing? The ambiguity allows readers to project their own fears, but the result is the same. The bright young Auror had been crushed under the weight of real battle. The aftermath is equally telling. Tonks did not return to the narrative immediately. When Dumbledore explained Voldemort's full return to Harry later that night, there was no mention of Tonks rejoining the group. Instead, she was sent to recover. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Harry reunites with her, she is noticeably changed. Lupin and others comment on her pale appearance, her subdued mood, her hair no longer the vibrant pink, but a mousy brown. Although her sorrow over Sirius's death is often highlighted as the cause, her injury cannot be separated from this transformation. She had been reminded in the most direct way that war was not a game, for someone who laughed easily and lived playfully. Such a reminder leaves a permanent shadow. This change is crucial because it demonstrates how Rowling develops her characters, not only through dialogue and relationships, but also through physical experiences. The Tonks who trips over umbrella stands is not the same Tonks who lies unconscious on the floor of the Ministry. By showing her weakness in battle, Rowling adds weight to her later struggles. Tonks is not invincible. Her resilience comes not from being untouched, but from surviving wounds that could have broken her. The cost of her service to the Order was real, and it is easy to overlook because readers focus on Sirius's death that night. Yet Tonks's wound stands as one of the earliest reminders that even beloved side characters can be deeply scarred. There is also symbolic value in her being struck down before the others. In storytelling, when the joyful figure falls, the tone of the narrative shifts. Readers who laughed with Tonks suddenly face silence, realizing that laughter cannot protect anyone in war. Rowling used this to heighten the sense of danger. If even the cheerful Auror could collapse in seconds, what hope did Harry and his friends have? The injury makes the moment more believable. War does not spare those who bring light. It targets them just as quickly, perhaps even faster, because they stand out. One might argue that Tonks's injury also serves a narrative purpose for Lupin's arc. At the time, their romance had not yet unfolded, but readers later see that Lupin is haunted by fears of her safety. His reluctance to marry her, his insistence that she deserves someone younger and unscarred, is connected to moments like the Department of Mysteries. He knows she is vulnerable, that she has already suffered, and he cannot bear to see her hurt again. Without the memory of her early fall in battle, his protective instincts might seem overblown. With it, they become tragically understandable. Number 16. Her family defied the pure blood cult. Of all the characters who step into the pages of the Harry Potter saga, Few carry within them a quiet but powerful defiance like Nymphadora Tonks. Her bright hair and playful nature often made readers smile, yet hidden beneath her ever-changing appearance was a story of rebellion against a deeply rooted system of prejudice. Tonks was not only a gifted Auror and loyal member of the Order of the Phoenix, but also the living embodiment of her mother's most daring choice, the decision to break away from the notorious Black family and their cult of pure blood supremacy. When Andromeda Black married Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born wizard, she was erased from the tapestry of her ancestors. This act of symbolic death was meant to frighten others into submission, but instead it gave birth to a daughter who would one day stand against the very ideology that tore her family apart. The House of Black prided itself on the phrase woven into their crest, toujours pur, meaning always pure. To them, blood purity was not just a belief, but an unyielding commandment. They boasted names like Bellatrix and Narcissa, women who embodied the pride and cruelty that came with this creed. Andromeda, however, became the stain in their lineage, the sister who chose love over blood, compassion over status. For marrying Ted Tonks, a man without noble ancestry, she was scorched off the family tree in Grimmauld Place. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Sirius shows Harry the tapestry, he points to the blackened burn mark where his cousin Andromeda once was. This erasure was a wound not only for her, but also for the generations to come. And in that wound, young Nymphadora Tonks learned what it meant to resist. The decision of Andromeda reverberated in her daughter's life. Tonks grew up not in the shadowed halls of the ancient Black family homes, but in a household where blood status meant little and kindness meant more. Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born who worked hard to be accepted in the wizarding world, raised his daughter with warmth and resilience. From him she inherited a grounded sense of equality, and from her mother she inherited a spark of rebellion against the suffocating expectations of old families. It was this combination that shaped her into someone who never feared being different. Her clumsiness, her vibrant hair, her refusal to fit into neat boxes, these were not flaws but deliberate ways of standing apart from the suffocating rigidity of her relatives. Becoming an Auror was another layer of defiance. The career path demanded discipline, strength, and courage. It was not the traditional life expected of a woman from the Black line, where elegance and alliances were prized above personal ambition. Tonks could have hidden, choosing a quiet career in some ministry office, but instead she chose the front lines of justice. She chose to chase dark wizards, including those who echoed the same ideology that had once disowned her mother. Mad-Eye Moody, her mentor, saw in her a spark of bravery, and she did not disappoint. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Tonks explains her role with pride. I qualified as an Auror last year, nearly failed on stealth and tracking. I'm dead clumsy, but I passed the concealment and disguise with top marks. This mix of humour and determination defined her, a fighter who never let imperfection stand in the way of her goals. The contrast between Tonks and her infamous aunt Bellatrix Lestrange could not have been greater. Bellatrix, fanatically loyal to Voldemort, was a woman consumed by her devotion to the cult of blood purity. She was willing to torture, kill, and destroy in its name. Tonks, by contrast, was willing to risk her life to protect Muggle-borns, half-bloods, and anyone who suffered under that same ideology. In the end, the two women clashed on the battlefield. Not merely as enemies of war, but as symbols of two diverging paths from the same family. Where Bellatrix embodied the suffocating past, Tonks represented a new future where blood mattered less than courage and love. Her relationship with Remus Lupin further underscored her defiance. Lupin, a werewolf, was considered untouchable by many in the wizarding world. Prejudice followed him everywhere, as his condition was seen as a shame and danger. Yet Tonks fell in love with him, not in spite of his condition but with full knowledge of it. She challenged his self-loathing and society's stigma. Their love story mirrored that of her parents. Andromeda had chosen a Muggle-born, and Tonks chose a man marked by a curse. Both unions were acts of rebellion against the oppressive structures of their time. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Tonks's despair over Lupin's rejection is described. The thing about growing up with a werewolf, Harry, is the constant fear of being rejected. But she persisted, and eventually they married, defying every whisper and prejudice along the way. The symbolism of Tonks's ability as a Metamorphmagus cannot be ignored in this context. Unlike most witches and wizards, she could change her appearance at will, shifting her face and hair as easily as breathing. While the Blacks clung to rigid definitions of purity, Tonks embodied fluidity and change. She was the living antithesis of their obsession with bloodlines. She could transform herself into anyone, and in that ability lay a truth. Identity was not fixed by ancestry, but chosen by the self. Every time she changed her hair to bubblegum pink or bright purple, she was making a statement, consciously or not, that she would never conform to the cold traditions of her family. Number 17, hair as a mood barometer. Of all the magical details J.K. Rowling wove into the Harry Potter universe, few are as subtly revealing as the metamorphic hair of Nymphadora Tonks. Readers are first introduced to her in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where she appears not only as a young Auror with a mischievous grin, but also as a witch whose very appearance betrays her inner state. The ability to shift her hair from bubblegum pink to deep violet, from spiky hedgehog bristles to flowing locks, is not merely a comedic flourish. It is a carefully designed narrative device, one that allows Tonks's private emotions to become visually legible to those around her. More than a parlor trick, her mutable hairstyle functions like a barometer of mood, a living metaphor for the turbulence and resilience of her character. The first impression she makes on Harry and the reader is electrifying. She explodes onto the page with pink hair and clumsy charm, tripping over an umbrella stand and laughing it off as though embarrassment were a foreign concept. This vivid presentation does more than set her apart from the grim-faced auras who accompany her. It establishes her as a character whose external flamboyance masks deeper complexities. Rowling emphasizes this in a single sharp detail. Tonks turns her hair into a spiky pink hedgehog as a kind of playful self-introduction, a visual signal that she does not take herself too seriously. Yet already the narrative sets the stage for how this visual gag will evolve into a poignant symbol. As the Order of the Phoenix gathers strength against Voldemort, Tonks becomes a constant presence, her pink hair blazing through the dark corridors of Grimmauld Place like a beacon of levity. Her interactions with Sirius Black reveal how her humor and brightness serve as a counterbalance to the suffocating gloom of that ancestral home. When Molly Weasley scolds the twins for their mischief, Tonks joins in, shifting her hair to different hues and faces to entertain them. Harry notices this with admiration, recognizing in her a form of magic that is joyful, even defiant, against the oppressive shadow of war. Her hair becomes an outward projection of a personality determined to remain unbowed. The tone shifts, however, in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Here, Rowling deploys Tonks's metamorphic ability not as a joke, but as an emotional index. The once bright and eccentric Aura is suddenly described as pale and tired-looking, and her hair was a mousy brown. Readers immediately feel the contrast. Gone is the wild spikiness, the daring neon shades. Instead, her hair seems to wither along with her spirit. The narrative later confirms what observant readers already suspect. She is suffering the anguish of unrequited love, weighed down by her feelings for Remus Lupin. Rowling's decision to mark this change through hair color rather than explicit inner monologue is both subtle and cinematic, like a film. Director, using lighting to communicate mood, the author lets Tonks's appearance carry the unspoken truth. The significance of this transformation becomes even more poignant when placed alongside Lupin's hesitations. His reasons for resisting Tonks, his fear of passing on lycanthropy, his age, his poverty, are noble in intention but devastating in effect. Tonks's hair communicates what she cannot say aloud. Rejection dims her spirit. As readers, we see her once electric palette reduced to the dull tones of disappointment. Rowling writes, "Her hair seemed to have lost its usual glow." In that small observation lies an entire story of longing and heartbreak, more effective than pages of dialogue could have achieved. The metaphor is strengthened by the reactions of those around her. Harry himself notices the change during the train ride to Hogwarts and feels a pang of worry. Even Molly Weasley, ever intuitive, urges Lupin to reconsider, hinting at the depth of Tonks's suffering. The unspoken but ever visible evidence is in her hair, a public declaration of private grief. Unlike most characters who can conceal turmoil behind masks of composure, Tonks is betrayed by her own magical gift. Her abilities make her more vulnerable, not less, because they strip away the barrier between inner life and outward appearance. In literary terms, this is a masterstroke of symbolism. The metamorphic hair functions like a living motif, shifting in tone to match the cadence of the narrative. Pink, violet, turquoise, these are colours of freedom, whimsy, and rebellion. Brown, mouse-like, limp, these are shades of despair, silence, and resignation. Readers understand the stakes of her emotional arc, not through exposition, but through colour. Rowling turns Tonks into a walking canvas, painting her sorrows and joys across the spectrum of light. It is an almost painterly device, an author using character design as brushstrokes. One of the most striking moments occurs after Tonks and Lupin finally reconcile. Following Dumbledore's death, grief overwhelms the wizarding world. Yet in this darkness, Tonks stands beside Lupin, her hand entwined with his, and her hair returns to its brighter hues. The symbolism could not be clearer. Love restored brings back colour, literally and metaphorically, to her life. Rowling does not belabor the point. She lets a single visual note convey the entire transformation. Tonks's hair was shining brightly again. The effect is that of a cinematic fade-in, a dark screen filling once more with vibrant light. The artistry lies in the restraint. Tonks's hair could easily have been reduced to a comic gimmick, a quirky trait that entertains without substance. Instead, Rowling layers meaning onto it, using it to communicate emotional truths that words cannot. In this sense, Tonks becomes one of the most visually expressive characters in the series, her body itself a canvas for narrative symbolism. The device is so effective that it resonates long after the book is closed, lingering in memory as an image of how inner storms manifest outwardly. Number 18, harsh Auror training, and she passed it. Of all the characters introduced in the later Harry Potter books, Nymphadora Tonks often stands out for her humour, clumsiness, and warm loyalty to her friends. Yet, hidden behind the light-hearted surface is a remarkable story of persistence and excellence that is often overlooked. The path that led Tonks into the ranks of the Aurors was nothing short of grueling, for the Auror office represented the pinnacle of magical law enforcement in Britain. Under the strict authority of Rufus Scrimgeour, who later became Minister for Magic, the Auror recruitment process demanded the highest academic achievement, moral clarity, and raw endurance. Tonks may have been remembered for tripping over umbrella stands in Grimmauld Place, but she had first proven herself through trials that very few witches or wizards could survive. The requirements for acceptance into Auror training were infamous. A candidate needed at least 5 NEWTs, the advanced magical examinations that only the most determined Hogwarts students even attempted. Moreover, the scores had to be exceeds expectations, or higher, a standard that cut away the majority of applicants. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Professor McGonagall herself explained the reality to Harry when he expressed his own dream of becoming an Auror. You'll need top grades for that, and you'll have to be prepared to put in some serious study. The message was clear. Academic brilliance was only the beginning. For Tonks to have made it through meant that beneath the playfulness was a sharp mind and an extraordinary work ethic, capable of passing examinations that defeated most of her peers. But academic scores were only the first gate. The Ministry of Magic demanded that Auror candidates possess a flawless record of behavior. This included proof of integrity, clean disciplinary files, and no sign of dabbling in dark magic. Rufus Scrimgeour, with his lion-like mane of hair and stern demeanour, had little tolerance for frivolity. He was a man of war forged in the fight against dark wizards, and he believed only the most reliable witches and wizards should carry the badge of an Auror. That Tonks, with her eccentric hair colours and irreverent humour, convinced Scrimgeour's department of her suitability is testament to her character. She may have laughed often, but the ministry saw in her a core of unshakable morality, which was exactly what Scrimgeour demanded in his officers. Once accepted, Auror training itself was a punishing ordeal. Trainees faced nearly 3 years of relentless education, combining advanced defensive magic, concealment, counter-espionage, and even stealth tactics. Mistakes were not tolerated, and physical danger was common. Mad-Eye Moody, legendary for his paranoia and uncompromising standards, often served as a mentor to younger recruits. Tonks came under his watch, and though she respected him, she did not escape his notorious harshness. In Order of the Phoenix, when Tonks greeted Harry and the others, with a grin, Moody barked instructions with his typical severity. His constant vigilance was more than a motto, it was the doctrine he pressed into Tonks until it became second nature. The cheerful witch who liked bubblegum pink hair had been drilled to detect a trap in every shadow. It is easy to forget that Auror training was designed for war. Britain, in the years following Voldemort's first fall, was still haunted by the Death Eaters, many of whom had avoided justice. The Ministry lived under constant threat of resurgence, and Aurors were the first line of defense. Tonks, therefore, was not simply learning to duel, she was being moulded into an elite fighter, expected to match the cunning of men like Antonin Dolohov and the cruelty of Bellatrix Lestrange. The skills required went beyond spells in a classroom. She had to master the art of disguise, the patience of surveillance, and the discipline to act alone against enemies who would kill without hesitation. Every Auror who graduated under Scrimgeour's eye was part of a rare brotherhood, and Tonks had earned her place within it. Perhaps the most striking contradiction in Tonks's story is the way her clumsiness coexisted with her professional excellence. Readers often remember her spilling stew at Grimmauld Place or breaking a plate at Molly Weasley's table. Yet clumsiness in domestic life did not prevent precision in combat. The Patronus she later conjured, a wolf symbolizing her love for Remus Lupin, was proof of magical strength. Patronus magic required not only skill but also a powerful command of one's motions. When Harry first met her, she admitted she had passed her Auror training only a year before, already serving as part of the Order of the Phoenix. That she was trusted so quickly to guard Harry Potter himself shows the faith Moody and Scrimgeour had in her abilities. McGonagall's words to Harry in Order of the Phoenix provide perhaps the clearest sense of what Tonks achieved. The professor described the background checks. They'll want to look at your record, your criminal record, or lack thereof. And beyond academics and background checks, the ministry demanded a grueling series of personality assessments. Tonks's natural humour may have helped here. While others might have cracked under the pressure of intimidation, Tonks was the kind of witch who could laugh even in the darkest moments. It was this resilience that made her not just a survivor of the Auror program, but a valuable member of it. In the chaos of raids and missions, the ability to steady morale was no small advantage. The presence of Tonks in the advance guard, the group tasked with extracting Harry from Privet Drive in Order of the Phoenix, shows the degree of her standing. Alongside Moody, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Remus Lupin, She was selected to protect the boy who represented Voldemort's downfall. The Ministry may not have openly sanctioned the mission, but the choice of Tonks for such a dangerous task revealed how far she had come. She was still young, not long removed from her Hogwarts years, yet already trusted with the most critical assignments in the war against the Dark Lord. No one who had merely scraped through Auror training could have been trusted in such company. One often overlooked aspect of Tonks's achievement is the sheer rarity of Auror success stories. Hogwarts graduates dreamed of Auror careers the way Muggles dreamed of becoming astronauts or presidents. Few even attempted it, knowing the requirements were brutally high. For every Tonks who emerged with a badge, there were dozens who failed, rejected either for lack of academic scores or faltering during the long trials. That Tonks, known for laughter and hair colours shifting from pink to violet, should be among the tiny elite that Scrimgeour allowed into the Auror office gives her character a depth not always appreciated in the narrative. The mentorship of Moody deserves further recognition. He was a man whose very eye could pierce invisibility cloaks and walls, a wizard who had survived countless duels with Death Eaters. Under him, Tonks would have faced constant drills, simulated ambushes, and forced vigilance. Moody himself remarked to Harry, "Constant vigilance," every time they met, and his trainees lived by those words. To withstand his scrutiny meant Tonks had discipline and focus beyond her playful facade. In many ways, her levity may have been a balance to Moody's darkness, keeping her spirit alive through endless pressure. But the foundation remained. She could fight like an Auror, because she had been tested by one of the greatest of them. Even after her training, Tonks's reputation was one of courage. She was present at the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, fighting shoulder to shoulder with Kingsley and Sirius Black. Though she was injured in that conflict, her presence among the Order's elite fighters confirmed her status. It is worth remembering that she had been qualified for little more than a year, yet she was thrown into a battle against Death Eaters like Lucius Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange. Her injuries were not a mark of failure, but proof of her willingness to put her life on the line, a quality the Auror office valued above all others. The tragedy of Tonks's story is that such achievements are often overshadowed by her later personal struggles. Her love for Remus Lupin, her despair during the war, and her eventual death in the Battle of Hogwarts all paint her as a figure of loss. Yet to understand Tonks only through those lenses is to miss the remarkable fact that she stood among the rarest of magical warriors. In a world where even Harry, the boy who lived, was warned by McGonagall about the difficulty of becoming an Auror, Tonks had already proven that she could pass every test and serve on the front lines of magical justice. Her character, then, represents a hidden paradox. She was not the stern and intimidating warrior that Scrimgeour favoured, nor the paranoid veteran like Moody. She was light-hearted, vibrant, often laughing at herself. But the very fact that she endured the Ministry's exhausting entry barriers, passed the exams, survived Moody's drills, and graduated into Auror status proves that her talents were extraordinary. She was not a casual recruit, not someone handed the title through favoritism. She had fought for it, earned it, and carried it proudly until her death. When looking at Nymphadora Tonks in this light, one sees not just the bubbly witch with a changing hairstyle, but an elite defender of the wizarding world. She stood in the rare company of Shacklebolt, Moody, and Dawlish, graduates of the Auror office who represented the sharpest blades of the Ministry. The humour and clumsiness were only one part of her. The other part was iron discipline hidden beneath. She had faced the Ministry's trials, survived Moody's tests, and emerged among the best. This is the little-known fact about Tonks. She was not merely comic relief, but a member of a brotherhood defined by grit, sacrifice, and excellence. Number 19, her trademark, Wotcher. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry first meets Nymphadora Tonks, the reader is struck not by a grand entrance or a formal introduction, but by something unexpectedly playful. The young witch, barely out of her training as an Auror, greets him with a phrase that feels almost out of place in the heavy atmosphere of war. "Wotcher, Harry!" The moment is small, almost fleeting, yet it carries a weight that defines Tonks's character and hints at the role she plays in the larger story. She does not introduce herself with the gravity of a ministry official or the sternness of Mad-Eye Moody who stands beside her. Instead, she disarms Harry's anxiety with a grin, brightly coloured hair, and a word that means little on the surface but everything when seen through her personality. It is here, in this light-hearted greeting, that Tonks begins to establish her unique role, the one who makes others feel at ease when darkness looms. Readers often recall Tonks's shifting hair, pink one moment, bubblegum blue the next, but her words are equally memorable, and Wotcher became her trademark. Rowling writes, "A young witch with a pale, heart-shaped face, dark twinkling eyes and short spiky hair that was a violent shade of violet was smiling at him. Wotcher, Harry!" This is not a casual throwaway line. It introduces Tonks with humour and levity at a time when Harry is reeling from suspicion, ministry, propaganda, and the trauma of Cedric Diggory's death. For him, surrounded by adults who treat him as either a threat or a burden, Tonks's greeting stands out as a bridge to normality. It is mischievous, almost childish, and yet it shows him that not everyone in the Order is cloaked in grim solemnity. The beauty of Tonks's Wotcher lies in its disarming power. When Harry enters Grimmauld Place, he finds himself in a dark, oppressive environment. The house is full of dust, shadows, and old black family relics whispering of hatred and blood purity. Sirius is burdened by the past, Molly Weasley is weighed down by fear, and even the Weasley children speak in hushed tones. Against this backdrop, Tonks bursts in like sunlight through a crack in a shutter. Her greeting, light as a feather, cuts through the gloom. It is not the grandeur of Dumbledore's speeches or the fearsome bark of Mad-Eye's commands. It is simply a cheerful acknowledgement that Harry exists, that someone is genuinely glad to see him. That is why it resonates. Tonks's choice of words reflects her own upbringing and spirit. Unlike the stiff, pure-blood etiquette of her black relatives, she chooses something casual, slangy, almost working-class in tone. She refuses the weight of old traditions. Bellatrix Lestrange might sneer and demand formality. Narcissa Malfoy might insist on aristocratic polish. But Tonks breaks free from that lineage with 2 syllables: Wotcher. It is rebellion in miniature, a declaration that she will not live under the suffocating rules of her family's name. In her mouth, the word becomes not only a joke, but an act of resistance. This seemingly small detail also signals her role as a buffer between generations. Tonks is a young Auror, part of the adult world of the Order, yet her language and mannerisms place her closer to Harry, Ron, and Hermione than to the seasoned veterans like Moody or Kingsley. When Harry hears her speak, he recognizes a kindred youthfulness. She may be tasked with deadly missions, yet she is not above tripping over an umbrella stand, laughing at herself, or calling a teenager mate in her own way. Her greeting is a reminder that the fight against Voldemort is not fought only by grim-faced warriors. It is also carried by people who insist on joy in the face of fear. Rowling's choice to give Tonks this verbal quirk enriches her storytelling. In tense scenes where the weight of the Ministry's lies bears down on Harry, Tonks's presence shifts the mood. When the advance guard arrives to escort Harry from Privet Drive, he expects to be treated like a dangerous parcel. Instead, Tonks kneels down, shakes his hand, and greets him with "Wotcher, Harry." The effect is immediate. Harry feels less like a burden and more like a person. The gesture does not erase his trauma, but it offers him a moment of reprieve. Consider how different this would have been if Tonks had spoken formally. If she had said, "Good evening, Mr. Potter," or "Harry, we've come to escort you," the interaction would have reinforced the atmosphere of authority and tension. Instead, the cheeky Wotcher brings with it a kind of levity that lingers in Harry's memory. The reader senses that Tonks chooses joy deliberately. It is not naivety. She knows full well the risks she faces. But she also understands that humor can be a shield as potent as any defensive spell. Tonks's greeting resurfaces later in the series, and each time it reminds us of her personality, even as the world grows darker. In Half-Blood Prince, when Tonks is weakened and consumed by her love for Remus Lupin, her absence of playfulness is striking. The reader notices immediately that something is wrong because the vibrant witch who once bounded into Grimmauld Place with Wotcher, Harry, now appears pale, withdrawn, and subdued. Rowling does not need to state outright that Tonks has changed. The contrast in her demeanor is enough. Her silence speaks as loudly as her greeting once did. In a way, Wotcher becomes a marker of Tonks's emotional state. It signals her brightness when she is free to be herself, and its absence hints at her struggles with rejection, fear, and the heavy toll of war. By giving her this distinct verbal habit, Rowling equips readers with a subtle tool for reading Tonks's inner life. When she does not say Wotcher, it is as if the spark of her character has dimmed. For Harry, who grows close to the Order and relies on their support, this shift is deeply felt. Another striking element of Tonks's greeting is its inclusivity. She uses it with Harry, but it reflects how she treats nearly everyone. Whether addressing Lupin, Sirius, or Molly, she never cloaks herself in unnecessary pomp. She levels the field, refusing to adopt the hierarchy that often separates adults from teenagers or Aurors from common wizards. Her word choice is as democratic as her personality. She values people for who they are, not their status, and her informal greetings embody that principle. This detail also illustrates Rowling's gift for character creation. The Harry Potter series thrives not only on sweeping plots, but also on the small quirks that make each character memorable. Luna Lovegood has her dreamy voice and radish earrings. Fred and George carry an endless arsenal of jokes. Tonks, in turn, has her ever-shifting hair and her Wotcher. These elements are not trivial. They shape the reader's emotional connection. A battle scene may stir adrenaline, but a single word of kindness can etch a character into memory for years. The fact that Tonks's Wotcher is often translated into Russian as Prefect demonstrates the challenge of capturing cultural nuance. The translators sought to preserve not the literal sound, but the feeling of cheeky informality. Prefect carries a playful diminutive, softening the greeting and giving it the same casual charm. This shows how universal Tonks's intention is. Across languages, readers recognize that she is not a stiff aura or a brooding warrior, but someone who insists on lightness even in the darkest times. One cannot overlook how Harry responds to Tonks in these moments. For a boy who has been belittled by the Dursleys, scrutinized by the Ministry, and doubted by much of the wizarding world, being greeted with genuine cheer is no small thing. It validates him. When Tonks waves off formality and greets him as if they are already friends, she grants him belonging. It is an antidote to the isolation he feels so often. That is why the reader, too, warms to Tonks instantly. She does not need a dramatic monologue. A single Wotcher is enough to make us trust her. The storytelling lesson in this detail is powerful. Rowling shows that character depth can emerge from the smallest linguistic choice. Tonks could have been remembered solely for her tragic fate or her romantic storyline with Lupin. Instead, she lives in readers' hearts because she dared to smile, dared to joke, dared to greet a boy with a silly word when everyone else treated him as a weapon or a burden. Her greeting is a gift of humanity in a world tilting toward inhumanity. Thus, every time we recall Tonks leaning into the frame of Grimmauld Place, hair blazing violet, eyes twinkling, and calling out, "Wotcher, Harry," we remember more than a word. We remember a philosophy. It is the philosophy that light can exist beside darkness, that humor can share a table with fear, and that kindness is sometimes best expressed in the simplest, most playful phrase. In Tonks's mouth it was never just a greeting. It was a statement of who she was and what she believed in, that no matter how grim the world became, she would face it with a smile and a spark. Number 20. Famous Clumsiness and the Umbrella Stand. Of all the members of the Order of the Phoenix, few carried such a striking duality as Nymphadora Tonks. She was young, fiery, and fiercely talented in combat, yet she was equally famous for something far less flattering, her spectacular clumsiness. Readers of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix cannot forget the recurring image of her barging through number 12, Grimmauld Place, only to knock over the infamous Black family's umbrella stand, sending it crashing with an echo that always succeeded in rousing the portrait of Walburga Black. What should have been a headquarters cloaked in secrecy often dissolved into chaos at the sound of her blunders. Rowling uses these moments to draw a sharp contrast between Tonks the capable Auror and Tonks the domestic disaster. And in those contrasting moments, her character comes alive as one of the most human and therefore beloved figures in the series. The Black family umbrella stand was more than furniture. It symbolized the lingering presence of the old, proud, and decaying Black dynasty. Made from the leg of a troll, it was heavy, grotesque, and entirely fitting for a house whose mistress screamed venom about mudbloods and blood traitors. Tonks, herself a blood relative of the Blacks through her mother Andromeda, seemed cursed to collide with this object, as though destiny demanded it. Every time her foot caught on its base, or her arm sent it sprawling, she exposed the literal and figurative clash between her free-spirited nature and the suffocating traditions of her family's past. This small comedic element carried symbolic weight. Tonks belonged to the Black family by blood, yet her life choices, becoming an Auror fighting Voldemort, embracing love with Remus Lupin, stood in complete rebellion against the legacy of the house. The books capture this irony with delightful precision. Rowling describes Tonks in Order of the Phoenix with the memorable line, "She knocked over the troll leg umbrella stand with a loud crash." It was a repeated gag, surfacing often enough that the reader could anticipate disaster whenever she entered the gloomy hallway. The detail always had consequences. The portrait of Walburga Black, Sirius's mother, would awaken with shrieks and insults that brought half the house running to silence her. What should have been a safe haven became a stage for discord, and Tonks's clumsiness was the match that lit the flame. This comical imperfection transformed her into someone vivid and real, standing in contrast to the heroic archetypes that often dominate fantasy tales. Her so-called legendary clumsiness went far beyond one umbrella stand. Rowling repeatedly emphasized her knack for tripping, stumbling, and colliding with the everyday objects of domestic life. Fans of the series came to adore her precisely because of this humanity. She could duel Death Eaters with skill and courage, yet she could not walk across a hallway without catastrophe. Harry himself noted the irony, surprised that an Auror, a profession demanding agility and reflexes, could so easily be undone by her own 2 feet. The humor gave her a battlefield nickname of sorts among admirers, the one who could trip at the worst possible time. This playful framing only strengthened her appeal. There is a deeper narrative logic in Tonks's clumsiness. In a house so steeped in history, pride, and rigidity, her constant mishaps functioned like accidental rebellions. The Black family valued control, elegance, and superiority. Tonks was none of those things. She dyed her hair bubblegum pink, wore mismatched clothing, and toppled over ancient heirlooms without the faintest apology. Every crash against the umbrella stand felt like a symbolic strike against the oppressive weight of her ancestry. Her body, uncontrolled though it seemed, was expressing rebellion in its most innocent form, refusing to walk the straight line demanded by her family's tradition. Readers also sense a deliberate use of comic relief in her portrayal. Order of the Phoenix is the darkest book up to its point, filled with political corruption, betrayal, and loss. Against this backdrop, Tonks's antics brought moments of levity. A crash, a shout from the portrait, frantic attempts to silence it, all served to momentarily lighten the heavy tone. The device was classic storytelling: inject humor through a character's flaw to humanize the ensemble and allow the audience to breathe. Rowling ensured that Tonks, for all her strength, would not be idealized into perfection. Instead, she carried the comedic vulnerability that balanced her gravitas as a fighter. One cannot forget the particular evening when Harry first arrived at Grimmauld Place and witnessed her clattering into the stand. The text recounts the moment with precision. Tonks knocked over the umbrella stand, and a deafening clatter echoed around the hall. The portrait of Sirius's mother woke with a start and began to scream. This was not merely a side gag. It became Harry's introduction to both Tonks and the volatile environment of the house. The scene established her character and the house's tension in one stroke. Tonks's fall was both literal and figurative, plunging the reader into the chaos of this new setting. It is worth noting how Tonks herself reacted to these incidents. She was never crushed by embarrassment, nor did she make excuses. Instead, she laughed it off, rolled her eyes, or continued forward as if accidents were as natural as breathing. This resilience added a layer of charm. She did not let clumsiness define her in a negative sense. Instead, it became part of her vibrant identity. In this way, she embodied a lesson for readers. Imperfections are not only forgivable but sometimes endearing. Strength and weakness coexist, and the result is authenticity. Her clumsiness also deepened her connection to Sirius Black. As cousins, they shared blood ties but diverged in paths. Sirius, a rebel who fled his family's ideology; Tonks, a free spirit born into the next generation. Her collisions with the Black House's heirlooms served as a visible reminder of Sirius's own inner conflict. He despised the house, the portrait, the traditions, yet he could not escape them. When Tonks knocked things over, it mirrored his own inability to fit into the family mold. The humor of her actions veiled a painful truth. The Blacks, in all their grandeur, had produced descendants who could not and would not live up to their rigid image. The repetition of the umbrella stand motif gave it a legendary quality among readers. It became a running joke within the fandom, often cited as the ultimate symbol of Tonks's clumsy charm. Fan communities nicknamed her the master of tripping at exactly the wrong time, a playful exaggeration of Rowling's own text. This humorous reputation survived beyond the books, cementing Tonks as one of the most relatable characters in the series. She was not untouchably heroic like Dumbledore, nor unshakably competent like McGonagall. She was flawed, lively, and thoroughly human. It is easy to underestimate the narrative power of small details, but Tonks's blunders are prime examples of how Rowling used them with precision. The umbrella stand is not remembered for its craftsmanship or magical significance. It is remembered for the sound it made when Tonks knocked it over. Such small strokes of humor anchor characters in the memory of readers. In the case of Tonks, they provided balance. She was a Metamorphmagus, capable of altering her face at will, a skill extraordinary even in the wizarding world, yet she could not control the simple act of walking through a hallway. The juxtaposition made her unforgettable. Her storyline, particularly in the later books, took a darker turn with her heartbreak over Remus Lupin's hesitation and the grief that consumed her after Sirius's death. Yet even then, her clumsy reputation remained an undercurrent of her character. Fans recalled the earlier days when she brought life into the grim walls of Grimmauld Place with her noise, her laughter, and her inevitable crashes. That past brightness made her later sorrow more poignant as readers contrasted the once effervescent young woman with the weighed-down figure she became. If one imagines the Black family's ancestral house without Tonks, the setting becomes even darker. The umbrella stand would remain untouched, the portrait perhaps less disturbed. But with her, the house lived. Her imperfections injected motion, sound, and laughter into a place designed for silence and gloom. The memory of her presence is inseparable from the imagery of toppled furniture and shrieking portraits. In this sense, her clumsiness was not just a trait, it was a narrative gift. Rowling crafted Tonks to be a paradox, highly skilled, yet constantly stumbling, powerful, yet never polished. That paradox resonated with readers because it reflected real life. People who are brilliant in one field often falter in another. Courage on the battlefield does not guarantee grace at the dinner table. By highlighting these contradictions through something as simple as an umbrella stand, the story gave readers permission to embrace their own flaws. Tonks's charm lies not in her perfection, but in her humanity, embodied in every crash, clatter, and clumsy step through number 12, Grimmauld Place. Number 21. Metamorphmagus does not mean Animagus. Of all the witches and wizards who captured the imagination of readers, Nymphadora Tonks stands out not only for her vibrant personality, but also for a talent that seems almost supernatural even in the magical world. J.K. Rowling chose to reveal her gift in a casual, almost playful way when Harry first meets her in Order of the Phoenix. She tilts her head and her hair changes colour on the spot. The moment is light-hearted, yet it hides a powerful distinction. Tonks is not just any witch with clever spells. She is a Metamorphmagus, someone born with the innate ability to alter her appearance without wandwork or incantation. That gift has been mistaken by many for Animagus ability, but the truth is very different, and the difference defines Tonks in a way that makes her even more remarkable. The confusion between Metamorphmagus and Animagus is understandable. Both involve transformation and both seem to break the limits of ordinary wizardry. Yet in the universe, Rowling crafted the mechanics, limits, and consequences of each are vastly different. A Metamorphmagus like Tonks changes instantly. Her nose grows pointed, her chin becomes square, or her hair glows bubblegum pink, and it all happens with a wink and a grin. Harry himself is startled when he sees her morphing, and Rowling writes, "She had a pale, heart-shaped face, dark, twinkling eyes, and short, spiky hair that was a violent shade of violet." "Wotcher, Harry," she said. The change is not studied, not rehearsed, not learned over decades. It is natural, instinctive, and impossible to teach. Animagi, on the other hand, require years of disciplined training, legal registration, and risk of permanent injury if the process is done improperly. Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and James Potter struggled for years to perfect their transformation into dog, rat, and stag, something Tonks could never do merely by her gift. The gift of the Metamorphmagus comes with its own restrictions. Tonks may create the illusion of being older, younger, or more striking, but she cannot copy the abilities of others, nor escape the basic framework of human form. She cannot sprout wings and fly, nor can she turn into a wolf. At most, she can stretch her features to comedic extremes, such as the time she entertains Ginny and Hermione by transforming her nose into a duckbill. Rowling allows us to see the limits clearly in Half-Blood Prince, when Tonks grows despondent after Sirius's death. Harry notes that her face is pale and her hair mousy brown, a striking contrast to the vibrant colours he had come to expect. Even Tonks herself admits, "I've lost my metamorphic abilities." Here we see the consequence of her human emotion. Her magic is tied not to training, but to mood, energy, and identity. By contrast, an Animagus transformation is absolute. When Sirius becomes Padfoot, he is no longer a man with dog-like features. He is entirely canine, his senses, body, and limitations identical to that of a real animal. That is why Animagi are registered with the Ministry of Magic, a law Dolores Umbridge smugly reminds Harry of in her oppressive lectures. The dangers of an untrained Animagus are extreme. Peter Pettigrew might have escaped notice for years, but he lived in the filth of a rat's life, his lifespan unnaturally twisted. A Metamorphmagus never faces this problem, for their talent does not rewrite biology. It reshapes only the visible mask of the person. Tonks is always Tonks beneath every change of feature. Rowling's choice to make Tonks a Metamorphmagus rather than an Animagus fits her character perfectly. Tonks embodies fluidity, humour and adaptability. She is clumsy on her feet, famously knocking over a mug in the Grimmauld Place kitchen, but her face is her playground. The ability to change in an instant reflects her playful personality. Imagine if she had been an Animagus instead. She might have turned into some clumsy animal, stuck in that form until she returned to human. Her gift allows her to remain herself, shifting like a painter with a palette of living colours. It is artistry, not disguise in the traditional sense. The significance of Tonks's gift also ties into the broader themes of identity and self-acceptance in the Harry Potter series. Unlike Polyjuice Potion, which allows a person to imitate another down to their hair and voice, Metamorphmagus transformations are never perfect copies. Tonks does not impersonate Bellatrix Lestrange. She cannot take someone else's voice or magical abilities. Instead, she adjusts, exaggerates, and reinvents her own features. She is not borrowing identity but expanding her own. This distinction matters because it emphasizes that Tonks's power is not about deception but about expression. It is a celebration of her uniqueness, something Rowling seems intent on reminding us whenever she enters the scene with new hair colours or playful faces. When teaching Harry about differences in magical abilities, Rowling uses Tonks as a counterpoint to Harry's own struggles. Harry cannot control his dreams, his emotions leak into his magic, and he is haunted by visions from Voldemort. Yet Tonks, though talented, suffers in a similar way when grief overwhelms her. In Half-Blood Prince, Pin avoids her affection, and her hair grows duller by the day. Here, Rowling crafts a subtle lesson. A gift is not freedom from suffering, nor is it invulnerability. Even the most extraordinary talent can wither under despair. This makes Tonks not simply a comic relief, but a mirror to Harry's own internal battles. The difference between Animagus and Metamorphmagus also reveals itself in the way each interacts with the law and tradition of the wizarding world. Animagi are bound by official registration. Minerva McGonagall, who transforms into a tabby cat, is one of the few legally registered. Her ability is revered, controlled, and respected. The Marauders, who learned the craft in secret, risked imprisonment for their unregistered forms. Tonks, however, is outside this system entirely. Her ability requires no license, no ministry oversight, no secret training. She simply is. This makes her rare but not illegal, admired but not policed. The ministry could never demand she stop changing her hair, nor could Umbridge ban her from elongating her nose. Her talent exists outside bureaucracy, and that too makes her stand apart. The storytelling around Tonks's gift is also laced with humour, a narrative choice that highlights its contrast with Animagus' gravity. Becoming an Animagus is a life-changing choice, often tied to loyalty or secrecy, as with James and Sirius joining Lupin during his werewolf transformations. For Tonks, being a Metamorphmagus is often treated as a punchline. She distracts young wizards by turning her face into a pig snout, or cheers up the dinner table by giving herself a square jaw like Dudley's. Rowling uses the same technique that she does with Fred and George's fireworks or Luna Lovegood's eccentricities. Magic as delight. Yet when we peel away the laughter, the underlying fact remains. Tonks's magic is singular, natural, and deep. This distinction matters for readers who confuse the two arts. One is craft, the other is gift. One requires dedication, the other is born in the blood. Rowling never explains why certain wizards are born metamorphmagi, but their rarity suggests a lineage or mystical quirk. Tonks herself never brags about it. She simply uses it as casually as another witch might flick her wand for Lumos. This humility makes the ability feel even more wondrous. When McGonagall shifts into a cat in front of Harry in Philosopher's Stone, he gasps. When Tonks changes her nose into a duckbill, Harry laughs. Both are awe-inspiring, but they sit in different emotional registers, one solemn, the other playful. The practical applications of Tonks's gift also underscore the divide. An Auror tasked with hunting dangerous dark wizards benefits enormously from being able to alter appearance at will. Disguises, infiltration, and protection become natural extensions of her skill, yet she cannot blend into the animal world like an Animagus might. Sirius survived years in hiding because dogs go unnoticed, and Peter Pettigrew escaped detection because rats are everywhere. Tonks would never escape that way. Her face may change, but she is always human. Thus, her power is one of immediacy and versatility, not concealment in the truest sense. Rowling also builds a subtle parallel between Tonks and Lupin. Lupin suffers a curse he cannot control. His werewolf form overtakes him against his will. Tonks, on the other hand, has a gift she can shape at will, unless her emotions interfere. Together they form two ends of a spectrum, one cursed to change unwillingly, the other blessed to change freely. Their eventual union deepens this symbolism. Where Lupin fears his own transformations, Tonks embraces hers, showing him that identity is more than a curse. That change can be a source of strength. This contrast adds a layer of poignancy to their tragic love story. Readers who conflate Metamorphmagus with Animagus miss this richness. By understanding the boundary, we see more clearly why Rowling included Tonks at all. She is not just a side character for comic relief, but a study in how magic reflects personality. She shows that some gifts are natural, some burdens are involuntary, and all must be navigated with courage. When Tonks lifts her chin, her hair glowing pink once more, it is not just a trick of magic. It is her way of saying, I am still myself no matter how I change. Number 22. Personal loss, her father's fate. Of all the characters who stood in defiance of Lord Voldemort, Nymphadora Tonks is often remembered for her courage, her colourful hair, and her unwavering loyalty to the Order of the Phoenix. Yet hidden beneath the surface of her story lies a deeply personal tragedy that gave her fight against the Death Eaters a searing urgency. Tonks was not simply an Auror fulfilling her professional duty, nor merely a member of the Order swayed by Dumbledore's cause. She was also a daughter who had watched her family torn apart by Voldemort's regime. Her father, Ted Tonks, paid the ultimate price when the Ministry of Magic fell into the hands of the Death Eaters. This loss was more than an entry in the long list of victims. It was the driving wound that pushed Tonks forward, even as fear and despair threatened to break her spirit. Ted Tonks was a Muggle-born wizard, a man who had chosen a life far from the prejudices of pure blood supremacy. His marriage to Andromeda Black, a woman from one of the most notorious pure-blood families, already made him an outcast in certain circles. He was despised by her relatives, disowned by the Blacks, and dismissed by Death Eater sympathizers as a disgrace to wizarding society. Yet Ted was known for his kindness, for his ability to laugh easily, and for the quiet strength with which he raised his daughter. To Nymphadora, her father was more than a symbol of defiance against tradition. He was a living reminder that love and acceptance could exist in a world that thrived on division. It was precisely this love that Voldemort's new order sought to erase. When Voldemort seized control of the Ministry, one of the first policies introduced under the corrupted government was the Muggle-born Registration Commission. Overseen by Dolores Umbridge, it branded Muggle-born witches and wizards as thieves of magic, accusing them of stealing wands and usurping power that did not belong to them. In practice, it was a legalized witch hunt. The trials were farce, the outcomes predetermined, and the punishments brutal. Ted Tonks, as a Muggle-born, became an immediate target. He knew that if he submitted to the commission, he would not return. For Andromeda, who had already been cast out of her family for daring to love him, the threat was unbearable. For Tonks, pregnant and newly married to Remus Lupin, the danger surrounding her father struck at the most vulnerable parts of her heart. Ted chose exile. He left his family home and went into hiding, becoming one of the many Muggle-borns who roamed the countryside in fear, hunted by snatchers and Death Eaters. Rowling captures the quiet terror of this moment in Harry Potter, and the Deathly Hallows when Lupin reveals to Harry, Ron, and Hermione that Ted is on the run. Ted Tonks is on the run too. The Muggle-born Registration Commission has been after him. These words may pass quickly in the narrative, but for Tonks they were a life sentence of dread. Every day brought the risk of an owl delivering the worst possible news. Every hour carried the chance that her father would be caught. For a young woman already torn between duty to the Order and her desperate desire to protect her new family, this shadow was devastating. The end came suddenly. Ted was captured by a group of snatchers led by Greyback's pack, alongside Dirk Cresswell, a former ministry official, and Gornook the Goblin. The group was executed in the woods far from the safety of home. Their bodies were left where they fell, unnamed victims of a system designed to erase them. This brutal death never reached the spotlight of the story the way other tragedies did, yet for Tonks it was as personal as any wound inflicted by Voldemort himself. She would have known that her father was hunted not for what he had done, but for what he was. The justice of his death carved deep into her resolve, making every mission, every battle, an act of remembrance. It is often overlooked that Tonks was fighting not just for the survival of the wizarding world, but to avenge the personal loss of a man who had given her a life of love and integrity. When Harry later hears a report of Ted's murder on Potterwatch, the underground radio station, it becomes one of the darkest reminders of how far Voldemort's poison had spread. Dirk Cresswell, Ted Tonks, and a goblin by the name of Gornook have been murdered by snatchers. To the listeners, it was a headline in a war that seemed endless. To Tonks, it was the silencing of her father's laugh, the end of the man who had taught her how to be brave without ever lifting a wand in anger. The emotional weight of this moment cannot be underestimated. By the time Tonks entered the Battle of Hogwarts, she was not merely fighting for abstract freedom. She was fighting with the knowledge that her father's blood had already been spilled by the enemy. This transforms her bravery into something deeply personal. She was no longer only the Auror trained under Mad-Eye Moody, nor just the clumsy young woman Harry first met in Grimmauld Place. She was the daughter of a murdered man, and her grief had been forged into resolve. The personal became political, and the fight against Voldemort was no longer distant ideology, but the struggle to ensure that her father's death was not meaningless. Rowling's narrative rarely pauses to describe Tonks's internal reaction to her father's murder, but the implications run through her later actions. She defies Remus's pleas to remain behind with their newborn son Teddy. Instead, she goes to Hogwarts, seeking him, yes, but also placing herself on the battlefield where the architects of her father's death would stand. It is here that her fate intersects with the cruelty of war. She dies at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange, her own aunt, Andromeda's sister, a pure-blood fanatic who represented everything Ted Tonks's life rejected. There is a grim poetry in the fact that Tonks fell to the wand of the very ideology that had stolen her father. Her death, therefore, cannot be separated from his. Father and daughter, both gone before their time, victims of the same war, Tonks's tragedy deepens when viewed through the lens of her son, Teddy Lupin. Named after the grandfather he would never know, Teddy represents the hope that life continues even in the shadow of violence. Yet the child grows up without parents, much like Harry himself, another victim of Voldemort's reign. The circle of loss repeats, and the echoes of Ted Tonks's murder reach far beyond his own generation. This is the true cruelty of war in the wizarding world, that its toll is measured not only in bodies, but in broken families and silenced futures. For Andromeda, who survived both her husband and her daughter, the price was unbearable. She lived with the scars of a war that claimed everything she had loved. Looking at the arc of Tonks's life, her father's death stands as a defining moment, even if it remains understated in the text. Every cause needs a spark, and for Tonks that spark was not ideology, but grief. It is easy to think of her as the light-hearted Metamorphmagus who brought levity to dark times, but beneath the shifting colours of her hair lived the raw wound of personal loss. This complexity makes her one of the most tragic and relatable figures in the series. She was a woman caught between love and war, family and duty, hope and despair, and it was the murder of her father that ensured she would never turn away from the fight. In analysing the larger themes of Harry Potter, the story of Ted Tonks illustrates how Voldemort's terror reached beyond the battlefield. His war was not only waged in duels and curses, but in policies designed to strip individuals of dignity and life. The Muggle-born Registration Commission symbolised the institutionalised hatred that fueled his rise, and Ted's murder was a direct consequence of that system. For Tonks, this was not abstract tyranny, it was personal cruelty. Her participation in the war cannot be fully understood without acknowledging this loss. She was not simply fighting for a better world, she was fighting because the old one had already stolen her father. The presence of Ted Tonks' name in Potter Watch is a haunting detail, easily overlooked but profoundly significant. It places him among the fallen, the faceless casualties of Voldemort's reign. Yet through Tonks his story is given flesh. Every act of defiance she carried out, every curse she cast in battle, can be seen as a tribute to the man who raised her to believe that worth is not measured in blood, but in love. This invisible thread ties her life to his, even in death. Though she never lived to see the dawn of peace, her struggle and her sacrifice ensured that the world her father dreamed of might yet come to pass. The tragedy of Nymphadora Tonks lies in the way personal grief and collective struggle became indistinguishable. She did not choose the war chose her when her father was branded an enemy. In the end, her story embodies the heart of Rowling's narrative, that behind every name lost in battle lies a web of family, love, and memory. Ted Tonks may not have wielded a wand in the final duel, but through his daughter, his spirit fought on. And in that way, his loss, though devastating, became the unspoken fuel that carried her to the very end. Number 23, A Short Life, a great legacy. Of all the heroes who fought for the freedom of the wizarding world, few embodied the paradox of joy and tragedy as perfectly as Nymphadora Tonks. She was born in 1973, the daughter of Andromeda Black and Ted Tonks, and from her earliest years she lived between two worlds, the noble but fractured house of Black on one side and the warm, rebellious world of her Muggle-born father on the other. This heritage shaped her, giving her both the fierce independence of her mother and the easy humour of her father. In the wizarding community, her Metamorphmagus gift made her stand out. Even among magical children, the sight of little Tonks changing her hair colour at will was something unforgettable. She carried that gift into adulthood, using it as a symbol of self-expression, rebellion, and courage. The world knew her by her smile, her clumsiness, and her bright hair, often pink, though she could shift it at will. Yet behind this vivid exterior lay a deep loyalty that would ultimately cost her everything. When Tonks entered Hogwarts in the mid-1980s, she was sorted into Hufflepuff. This might surprise some, since her flamboyant personality seemed to clash with the house known for quiet loyalty and hard work. But in truth, Tonks embodied Hufflepuff's spirit. She was loyal to her friends, steadfast in her convictions, and tireless in her efforts. From school days onward, she was known as someone who, despite her clumsiness, would stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. Later, J.K. Rowling herself remarked that Hufflepuff's quiet values were often overlooked, but in Tonks one could see them burn brightly. She became an Auror under Mad-Eye Moody's training, showing that the supposedly average house could produce some of the bravest defenders of the wizarding world. By the time Harry Potter met her in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Tonks was already a seasoned Auror. She had completed one of the most difficult career paths in the wizarding world, and her role in the Order immediately marked her as one of Dumbledore's trusted fighters. Her first appearance to Harry was unforgettable, clumsy, cheerful, with bubblegum pink hair and a grin that seemed to light up the gloomy kitchen of number 12, Grimmauld Place. The contrast between her. Bright personality and the darkness of the times underscored her importance. In that moment, Harry and the readers were introduced to a fighter who carried light into even the darkest rooms. Sirius Black called her Nymphadora, much to her irritation, and her reply, "Don't call me Nymphadora, Remus," became one of her defining characteristics. Her refusal to be called by the name chosen by her pure-blood family reflected her rejection of its dark legacy. Tonks's short life was also defined by her love story with Remus Lupin. This was no ordinary romance, but one marked by pain, hesitation, and ultimately triumph. Remus resisted her affection for a long time, believing himself too poor, too old, and too dangerous because of his lycanthropy. He famously told her, "It is because I am too old, too poor, too dangerous," trying to push her away. But Tonks would not be dissuaded. In one of the most emotional moments of Half-Blood Prince, she confronted Remus in the hospital wing, refusing to let him hide behind excuses. "You see, she still wants to marry me, even though I am such a foul creature," Remus exclaimed bitterly. But Tonks's determination, rooted in her fierce Hufflepuff loyalty, eventually overcame his doubts. Their union was both tragic and beautiful, a testament to love's defiance of fear. Her hair often mirrored her emotions, a living reflection of her inner state. In Half-Blood Prince, when she was heartbroken over Remus's refusal, her hair lost its bright pink color and turned a mousy brown. Harry noticed the change and misunderstood it, thinking she mourned Sirius. In truth, her very identity seemed muted until Remus accepted her love. This detail is crucial, for Tonks's hair symbolized not just her gift, but her heart. When her spirit was dimmed, so was her gift. And when her love was finally returned, the colors came back. Rowling used Tonks's Metamorphmagus ability not just as a magical quirk, but as a narrative device to show her emotional depth. By the time the Second Wizarding War reached its height, Tonks was both a wife and a mother-to-be. In 1998, she gave birth to Teddy Lupin, her only child. This moment should have been one of happiness, but the war's shadow loomed too large. Knowing the risks, she and Remus continued to fight. It was Harry Potter who became Teddy's godfather, creating a symbolic connection between the two boys. Both lost their parents to the war against Voldemort. Remus, shortly before the Battle of Hogwarts, told Harry, "I am sorry, Harry. I am sorry you must be burdened with this, but you are the godfather of Teddy." It was as if Lupin passed the torch of responsibility to Harry, entrusting him with the child's future. This moment made clear how Tonks and Remus's legacy would live on even after their deaths. Her death came suddenly and cruelly during the Battle of Hogwarts in May 1998. She had rushed to join the fight after leaving her newborn son in the care of her mother, Andromeda. Tonks could not stay away when her family, her friends, and her world were under threat. She died at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange, her own aunt, in a clash heavy with symbolism. Bellatrix represented the dark, pure-blood fanaticism of the Black family, while Tonks embodied the rejection of that legacy, love, loyalty, and defiance. To fall by her aunt's wand was a cruel circle of fate, a reminder that war often strikes most viciously within families. She was only 25. This fact remains staggering. She accomplished so much in so little time. At 25, she was already an Auror, a key member of the Order of the Phoenix, a wife, and a mother. She embodied the idea that courage and purpose do not require long lives. Her entire existence was compressed into a quarter of a century, yet her influence extended far beyond her years. Like Fred Weasley, she became a symbol of youth cut short by war, proof that Voldemort's reign destroyed lives at their brightest moments. The aftermath of her death left a poignant legacy. Her son Teddy grew up without parents, much like Harry. Yet unlike Harry, Teddy was not alone. He had a grandmother, Andromeda, and a godfather who understood exactly what it meant to grow up with loss. Harry's role in Teddy's life was not just formal but deeply personal. He ensured that Tonks's son grew up with love, connection, and stories about his parents' bravery. Rowling never wrote Teddy's full life, but she revealed in interviews that he grew into a boy who, like his mother, could change his appearance at will. This gift symbolized her living legacy, carried forward in every strand of hair that shifted color. Tonks's courage is often overshadowed by louder figures in the saga, but her quiet bravery deserves recognition. When the Order guarded Harry during the flight from Privet Drive, she was among the 7 volunteers who risked their lives by taking Polyjuice Potion to become his double. Her willingness to step into danger without hesitation reflected the core of her character. She never sought glory or recognition. Even when mocked for her clumsiness or underestimated for her cheerful personality, she proved herself again and again. In the end, her sacrifice placed her among the war's martyrs, equal to Dumbledore, Sirius, and the Weasleys. Her connection to Harry was subtle but profound. Though only 7 years older, she often served as a bridge between the adults of the Order and the young fighters of Hogwarts. To Harry, she was both a friend and a mentor. Her light-hearted nature gave him brief moments of relief in the suffocating darkness of war. Yet her death, like so many others, reinforced his understanding of what was at stake. Every person he loved could be taken, and Tonks was one of those losses that reminded him the war was not abstract. It was deeply personal. Even in death, Tonks remained a symbol of defiance. She refused to live quietly, refused to let fear dictate her choices, refused to accept Remus's self-loathing as the final word. She lived colourfully, even recklessly, in a time when caution might have saved her life. And yet that was precisely why her story matters. Her bright hair in the halls of Grimmauld Place was more than an aesthetic. It was a statement that even under Voldemort's shadow, joy, individuality, and love could exist. She carried the weight of her family's dark history, but chose to live in direct opposition to it. The tragedy of Tonks is inseparable from the tragedy of Remus. They both died in the same battle, leaving their child behind, echoing the fate of James and Lily Potter. But unlike Harry's parents, who had only one night of choice, Tonks and Remus chose again and again to fight, even when retreat was possible. Their love, their union, and their deaths together gave the war a deeply human dimension. It showed that war does not spare those who love most deeply, it demands their sacrifice. In remembering Nymphadora Tonks, one recalls not only the clumsy Auror with pink hair, but the 25-year-old woman who stood against darkness with unwavering loyalty. Her story is short, almost too short, but every page of it is filled with courage, defiance, and love. In a world where many lived long but cowardly lives, Tonks's brief flame burned brighter. And though her life ended at 25, her son's shifting hair colours, Harry's guardianship, and the memory of a laugh echoing through Grimmauld Place ensured that Nymphadora Tonks was never truly gone. Number 24, a half-blood against prejudice. Nymphadora Tonks was born into a world that clung fiercely to traditions of blood purity, but from the very beginning she embodied contradiction. Her father, Ted Tonks, was a Muggle-born wizard who had risen above the prejudice of pure-blood society. Her mother, Andromeda Black, came from one of the most notorious pure-blood families in wizarding history, the House of Black. By the rigid standards of the old wizarding aristocracy, this combination made Tonks a half-blood. To many, it was a scarlet letter, a mark that meant she would never be truly accepted among the so-called noble families. Yet Tonks never let that label define her. Instead, she wore her identity with pride, treating the notion of tainted blood as a joke unworthy of respect. It was this defiance, deeply rooted in her family history, that made her not just a witch, but a symbol of resistance. The Black family was infamous for its obsession with lineage. Walburga Black's portrait screamed endlessly about filth and blood traitors, while names of disowned relatives were blasted off the family tapestry. Andromeda was one of those erased for marrying Ted, a man she loved, even though he had no wizarding ancestry. To Bellatrix Lestrange, her eldest sister, Andromeda's choice was an unforgivable betrayal. Bellatrix's venom reflected the family's doctrine. The Dark Lord will cleanse the world of the Muggle filth. Within that rigid worldview, Andromeda's daughter was tainted from birth. Nymphadora knew this, but rather than cower, she transformed the stigma into fuel. Her very existence was proof that love mattered more than ancient bloodlines, and she chose to embrace her heritage as a half-blood rather than deny it. Tonks did not merely reject prejudice with words, she dismantled it with action. After graduating from Hogwarts, she entered training as an Auror, one of the most demanding and dangerous professions in the wizarding world. Becoming an Auror required exceptional skill, resilience, and moral courage, qualities often claimed by pure-blood supremacists as their exclusive domain. Tonks's acceptance into the program was a clear rebuttal to that claim. Kingsley Shacklebolt once observed her talent with approval, and even the stern Mad-Eye Moody, a man with little patience for weakness, respected her abilities. Rawling describes Tonks with characteristic energy. She had a pale, heart-shaped face, dark, twinkling eyes, and short, spiky hair that was a violent shade of violet. But this was not the portrait of someone shackled by society's chains. Instead, it was a woman who embraced individuality and proved herself through skill rather than ancestry. Her career choice mattered more than many realize. The Ministry of Magic itself was not immune to subtle biases. Pure bloods dominated its upper ranks, and quiet whispers often dismissed half-bloods as second-tier wizards. By stepping into the Auror's office, Tonks shattered a glass ceiling that others hesitated to touch. She was young, unconventional, sometimes clumsy, but she carried an authority that came from action. During her time working with the Order of the Phoenix, she stood alongside figures like Alastair Moody, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Remus Lupin. Each mission she undertook undermined the ideology of people like Bellatrix, who sneered at her very existence. Blood purity meant nothing when Tonks was on the front lines, defending the wizarding world with courage equal to any so-called noble-born witch. There is a particularly telling contrast between Tonks and her aunt Bellatrix. Bellatrix prided herself on being pure blood, yet her life was consumed by fanaticism, cruelty, and devotion to Voldemort. Tonks, branded as a half-blood and ridiculed by her relatives, lived with joy, humor, and unshakable loyalty. One side of the family wielded blood as a weapon, while the other wielded love as a shield. When Tonks dueled Bellatrix during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, it was more than family against family. It was a clash between two worldviews, the suffocating obsession with purity and the liberating truth of individuality. The fact that Tonks was there at all, wand in hand beside Harry and Sirius, was proof that the hierarchy of bloodlines had already crumbled. Tonks's half-blood status also held a symbolic weight during the Second Wizarding War. Voldemort's regime explicitly targeted Muggleborns, persecuting them with the Muggleborn Registration Commission. Dolores Umbridge and her collaborators demanded to know how such witches and wizards stole magic. Against this atmosphere of terror, Tonks's presence in the Order was both practical and symbolic. As a witch of mixed heritage, she represented the world. Voldemort despised. She was not merely fighting for survival, but for the right to exist, for the legitimacy of families like her own. Her marriage to Remus Lupin, himself an outcast for reasons unrelated to blood, doubled down on her statement. Love and loyalty transcended every prejudice. When Harry first encountered Tonks, he was struck by her playfulness. She shifted her nose into bizarre shapes and treated him like a younger brother rather than the chosen one. In that moment, Rowling highlighted what set Tonks apart. She thrived by being herself. Her Metamorphmagus ability symbolized this defiance, for she could literally change her face, mocking the very idea that identity was something rigid and inherited. Blood may have been immutable in the minds of supremacists, but Tonks showed that character, courage, and even appearance were flexible, transformable, and free. She turned what others saw as weakness into strength, dismantling the Black family's obsession with purity at its core. The prejudices Tonks endured were not theoretical. At Grimmauld Place, Sirius Black bitterly remarked about his family's bigotry, saying, "My mother blasted me off the family tree for being friends with Muggle-borns." Tonks grew up under the same shadow, watching her mother disowned for choosing love over tradition. These choices shaped Tonks's spirit. She inherited not only her mother's courage but also her father's resilience as a Muggle-born in a hostile society. Every time she entered a room as an Auror, she carried that legacy, silently testifying that greatness is born from choices, not bloodlines. It was this conviction that gave her words weight and her laughter sharpness. To sneers of half-blood, she responded not with shame, but with irreverence. Rowling emphasized Tonks's role through subtle contrasts. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Slughorn's gatherings showcased the students he deemed most talented or prestigious, often leaning toward famous names and pure-blood backgrounds. Tonks never fit such elitist circles, yet she wielded real influence where it mattered most, in the battlefield, in the corridors of the ministry, and in the hearts of those she inspired. Her status as a half-blood was irrelevant when she stood guard over Hogwarts or escorted Harry safely to Grimmauld Place. This dichotomy underscored a truth Rowling wove. Throughout the series, prestige and bloodlines might open doors in salons and parlours, but only courage opened doors in war. Perhaps the most striking moment of Tonks's defiance came in her personal life. When she fell in love with Remus Lupin, she faced criticism not unlike her mother had endured decades earlier. Remus insisted he was too poor, too old, and too cursed to deserve her. Yet Tonks dismissed all these objections with stubborn devotion. "I don't care," she declared in the hospital wing, standing firm despite Lupin's shame. This mirrored Andromeda's choice to marry Ted Tonks despite family outrage. In both mother and daughter, love trumped the chains of prejudice. The union of a half-blood witch and a werewolf carried even greater symbolic weight. Together they dismantled two powerful stigmas at once. The tragedy of Tonks's story only amplifies her defiance. She fought in the Battle of Hogwarts and laid down her life beside her husband. Their deaths left behind a child, Teddy Lupin, who embodied yet another generation of unconventional heritage, the grandson of a Muggle-born, the heir of a pure bloodline, and the son of a werewolf. Teddy's very existence mocked Voldemort's dream of a pure blood world. Though Tonks died, her legacy lived on in her son, in Harry, who godfathered him, and in every witch and wizard who saw blood purity for the empty slogan it was. In this sense, Tonks did not lose to prejudice. She outlasted it. The importance of Tonks' half-blood identity is often overlooked because of her vibrant personality. Readers remember her pink hair, her clumsiness, her humour, yet behind that charm lay a defiance as sharp as any wand. She proved that a half-blood witch could not only join the Aurors, but also reshape the meaning of heroism. She showed that one could laugh in the face of aristocratic contempt and still wield power that mattered. Her life was both ordinary and extraordinary, reminding readers that prejudice may shout loudly, but it cannot withstand those who quietly, persistently live against it. If Bellatrix was the face of fear and hatred, Tonks was the face of resilience and rebellion. Every time she stumbled but got up laughing, she broke down the myth of superior blood. Every mission she completed, every Death Eater she faced, every moment she stood with the Order of the Phoenix reinforced the same truth, that courage cannot be measured by genealogy. In this way, Tonks became a hidden cornerstone of Rowling's theme, more than comic relief or romantic subplot. She was the proof that heritage never defines destiny. Even within the lore of the wizarding world, Tonks represents a turning point. The fall of Voldemort did not just end tyranny, it dismantled the cultural foundation that fueled it. Families like the Malfoys reeled in the aftermath, their old pride stripped of meaning. And in contrast stood Tonks's memory, a witch who never sought prestige, who laughed at rules, and who gave everything in defense of a world where half-bloods, muggle-borns, and outcasts could live freely. Her story whispers the deeper lesson of the series, one often hidden beneath the louder battles and prophecies, that the quiet defiance of individuals can erode centuries of prejudice more effectively than any speech. In the end, Tonks's life reminds readers of Dumbledore's words, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." For Tonks, the choice was always clear. She chose laughter over bitterness, love over tradition, action over words. As the half-blood daughter of a disgraced black, she was never meant to be a hero in the eyes of her family. But by defying those expectations, she became something far greater, proof that the myth of blood purity could be shattered not with politics, but with one woman's courage to live as herself. And that perhaps is the most powerful magic of all. Number 25. Patrols around Hogsmeade and Hogwarts. Of all the Aurors who appeared in the Harry Potter saga, few had a presence as enigmatic as Nymphadora Tonks. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, her role is often overshadowed by the dramatic events surrounding Dumbledore's mission with Harry, the emergence of the Half-Blood Prince's book, and the growing menace of Draco Malfoy's secret task. Yet Tonks was quietly written into the margins of the story, not through spectacular duels or witty exchanges, but by the steady, watchful duties she performed on the outskirts of Hogwarts. These were the Hogsmeade-Hogwarts patrols, a stretch of dull yet critical vigilance that kept the ancient castle standing longer than most realized. The picture of Tonks most readers remember is of the clumsy, pink-haired Metamorphmagus with a mischievous grin, but in this book she is shadowy, pale, and subdued. Behind that change was an unglamorous assignment that carried its own quiet heroism. The book itself gives us a haunting hint of her exhaustion. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione meet her unexpectedly at the gates of Hogwarts, the text describes her as thinner, with hair a mousy brown, her energy drained. She had been posted there to guard, to monitor, to seal what cracks Voldemort's growing power was forcing open. Rowling does not describe each night, each hour Tonks spent patrolling in the dark, but the implication is clear. This was a battle of attrition, of endurance against despair, patrolling between the village of Hogsmeade and the castle meant long walks along torchlit paths, checking wards and scanning the shadows where enemies might creep. She was, in effect, a sentinel against the collapse of security. Why Tonks? One might expect Mad-Eye Moody, Kingsley Shacklebolt, or another veteran Auror. Yet Dumbledore and the Ministry placed her there, and the decision reflects trust in her talent, as well as the urgency of the times. In The Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 8, Snape Victorious, Tonks intercepts Harry and his friends on the train and later escorts him to the castle gates. Her presence is weary but firm, and Harry notices the difference immediately. She looked drawn, even ill, her hair lank and lacking its usual vibrancy. That line is not accidental. It is Rowling's way of saying that the work of defending Hogwarts was not glorious, but it was grinding her down. Each night spent at her post meant fewer hours of rest, more weight pressing against her spirit. Consider what those patrols meant in practice. Hogwarts, once thought to be the safest place in Britain, was no longer a fortress, immune to infiltration. Dementors roamed the countryside, Death Eaters had returned openly, and attacks struck even innocents like Katie Bell in Hogsmeade. The patrol from Hogsmeade to the castle was more than a symbolic gesture. It was an essential choke point. Students had to pass through the village to reach the castle, visitors came by the train, and shops in Hogsmeade could be exploited for ambushes. Tonks would have been tasked with sweeping those alleys behind the 3 broomsticks. Casting detection charms in the shadow of honeydukes and making sure the narrow path up to the castle gates held its wards intact. The irony is that most of her work went unseen, even unappreciated by the very students she was protecting. They would glance at her once, note the dim light of her wand, and hurry back to their common rooms. But those nightly rounds kept danger at bay. One can imagine Tonks pausing near the shrieking shack, listening for footsteps that should not be there. Wand raised, her Metamorphmagus powers subdued, because blending into the night was more useful than bright pink hair. For a woman who had once delighted in shocking friends with wild appearances, this anonymity was almost a sacrifice in itself. Rowling, in a subtle move, links Tonks's change of demeanour to her hidden duties. Readers often interpret her melancholy solely through her unrequited feelings for Remus Lupin, and indeed that personal sorrow was present. But the text suggests more. She was drained not only by love, but by the constant burden of guard work. In Chapter 15, The Unbreakable Vow, Harry notices that Tonks's Patronus had changed, though he does not yet understand why. A change in Patronus is a symbol of deep emotional upheaval, but also of responsibility. To guard Hogwarts, to keep the Dementors away, meant summoning that Patronus again and again in lonely hours by the gates. A lesser-known moment comes when Tonks is implied to have been near the scene of Katie Bell's cursed necklace incident. While not directly named, the patrols around Hogsmeade were her responsibility, and her failure to prevent the attack weighed heavily. The text in Chapter 12 notes how security was being tightened, professors patrolled the corridors, and Aurors kept watch outside. Tonks was among them. If Katie Bell could be cursed in broad daylight on a trip to Hogsmeade, then Tonks's unseen fight to guard the perimeter becomes all the more poignant. She was plugging leaks in a ship that had already been holed beneath the waterline. There is an artistry in how Rowling writes her into the shadows. Other Aurors are given bursts of dramatic action, Kingsley battling in the Ministry, Moody training recruits, Shacklebolt coordinating efforts, but Tonks is consigned to the lonely walk between the village and the school. In literature, this echoes the role of the unsung sentinel, the guard whose name is never carved into monuments, but whose vigilance keeps calamity at bay. If we were to dramatize those pages unwritten, we might see Tonks tracing the wards along the castle gate, muttering Protego totalum and Muffliato as she strengthens the invisible barriers. We would see her slipping into the Hog's Head to confer briefly with Aberforth Dumbledore, another silent guardian whose tavern kept eyes on suspicious movement. These small gestures formed the defensive lattice around Hogwarts in its last year under Dumbledore. Her work also meant constant interaction with professors, many of whom were unaccustomed to cooperating with Aurors. Imagine Professor Flitwick and Tonks walking the path together, the tiny charms master casting detection spells, Tonks responding with aura-level counter-curses, or Professor Sprout inspecting the grounds for signs of tampering, while Tonks swept the forbidden forest edge with revealing charms. Rowling does not narrate these scenes, but the structure of Hogwarts' defences makes them inevitable. Tonks was a bridge between the Ministry's official security and the professor's deep local knowledge. That partnership mattered. The toll on her spirit is clear when Harry sees her at Christmas at the Burrow. Her Aunt Bellatrix has escaped Azkaban, her cousin Draco is up to something sinister in the castle, and Remus Lupin remains distant. But beyond personal sorrow lies the weariness of a young Auror who has been posted night after night to stand guard in the cold. She looked as though she had lost weight, the book says, and her eyes had a haunted look. Guard duty rarely makes a hero's tale, but it can drain more deeply than a single battle. To grasp the scale of her role, one must consider that these patrols were not simply a Hogwarts matter. Hogsmeade was the last all-wizarding village in Britain, and it was a symbol in itself. If Death Eaters had struck openly there, morale across the country would have collapsed further. Every night Tonks walked those cobblestone streets. She was protecting not only students, but the very idea that a safe haven still existed in a darkening world. That is why Rowling places her there. It was not random, it was symbolic. When Dumbledore is killed, and the castle's defences crumble in the Half-Blood Prince, Tonks is among the first to rush to the Astronomy Tower battle. That final desperate fight, where she duels Death Eaters alongside Bill Weasley, Fleur and Remus, is the eruption of everything her patrols had been holding back. For months she had worked in silence, preventing small infiltrations. On that night, the full force broke through and her duty transformed into open combat. Her exhaustion makes sense. She had been preparing for the inevitable, and when it came, she had nothing left to give except courage. What remains so striking is how easy it is to forget her role when discussing the sixth book. Readers talk of Horcruxes, the Half-Blood Prince's potions tips, Dumbledore's hand, and Snape's betrayal. Yet Tonks's silent patrols are the invisible threads binding the story's background. Without them, Hogwarts might have fallen even earlier. Rowling chose not to dramatize those moments, perhaps to mirror the way society often overlooks such uncelebrated tasks. But by leaving just enough traces, Harry noticing her appearance, the professors referencing tighter security, the students whispering about auras on the grounds, she allows careful readers to reconstruct the truth. Tonks's patrols between Hogsmeade and Hogwarts serve as a reminder that heroism is not always about glory. It can be the quiet nightly walk in the dark, wand lit only faintly, ears straining for unnatural silence, heart heavy with loneliness. It is about showing up again and again when the world grows darker and the castle one guards is no longer invincible. In those forgotten passages of the Half-Blood Prince, Nymphadora Tonks held the line, and though the text gives her only fleeting words, the reality is that her grey work, as some might call it, was the fragile wall between safety and chaos in that uneasy year. Number 26. When magic falters from grief. In the world of Harry Potter, certain details slip quietly into the margins, barely noticed unless one looks closely. Nymphadora Tonks, the young Auror and gifted Metamorphmagus, is one such character whose struggles tell a story that often goes overlooked. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, her once vibrant personality dims, and Rowling leaves subtle but powerful clues about the depth of her suffering. The most striking symbol is her hair. Where Tonks's ability to change her appearance had always seemed effortless, even playful, it now becomes dull, heavy, and unreliable. Her once electric pink hair fades to a mousy brown, and with it, the reader is shown that grief and unspoken heartbreak can silence even the brightest sparks of magic. This transformation is not simply aesthetic. In the Harry Potter universe, few characters are given innate magical gifts beyond wands and spells, yet Tonks was born with the rare power of Metamorphmagus. From her earliest appearances, she embodies joy in change. She uses her talent to amuse friends, to lighten dark moods, and to assert her identity as someone constantly in control of her self-image. When Harry first meets her in Order of the Phoenix, she proudly shows off by shifting her nose into different shapes. "You're a Metamorphmagus," said Lupin. "You can change your appearance at will." That talent was introduced as an extension of her humour and vitality. But by the next book, something in her has broken, and the same gift begins to falter under the weight of her despair. The cause of this grief lies in her unrequited love for Remus Lupin. She is a woman who has chosen to love someone haunted by scars, poverty, and self-doubt. Lupin's refusal to be with her is born out of fear that his condition as a werewolf will ruin her life. His rejection, though meant to protect her, leaves Tonks stranded in an abyss. Rowling paints the picture with rare precision. In Chapter 8 of Half-Blood Prince, Harry observes Tonks at the station. Her hair was a mousy brown, and she looked thinner than usual. To the casual reader, this is a passing note, but in the coded language of the series, where hair colour is the barometer of her emotional state, the sentence strikes like a bell. The weakening of Tonks's Patronus adds another layer to her unravelling. Her Patronus, once bright and strong, changes form and grows weaker. Later, it becomes clear that it has shifted into a wolf, reflecting her love for Lupin. But in the moment when Harry notices it, her spell falters. Tonks's Patronus was weak and indistinct. It looked as though it had lost its shape. This is one of the most profound examples in the entire canon of emotion, directly rewriting magic itself. It is not just her spirit that is damaged, but her very magical essence. Rowling's choice to make Tonks's grief interfere with both her Patronus and her metamorphic ability marks her as a living metaphor for how heartbreak can silence one's natural gifts. Tonks's decline is unusual because it is not tied to external curses, injuries, or dark magic, but to inner despair. Other characters suffer emotionally, of course. Harry struggles with trauma, Snape is chained to bitterness, and Sirius with imprisonment, but their magic itself does not fail them. Harry's spells may falter when he loses focus, yet he never loses his wand's connection to his will. Tonks, however, experiences something deeper. Her grief throttles her very identity. For a Metamorphmagus, the ability to shift form is not a spell learned, but a reflection of inner self. When that self is fractured, the gift collapses. This is rare in the canon, and Rowling does not linger on it, but its presence reveals a world where emotions are not secondary to magic, but bound to it at the root. The symbolism of her hair cannot be overstated. Hair in literature often serves as a reflection of vitality, and for Tonks, who once dyed her very strands in bursts of playful colours, the transformation into dull brown is a surrender. Readers notice the shift even before Harry understands it. When he sees her at Christmas at the Burrow, he is struck by her changed demeanour. She looked thin and pale, her hair lank and lacking lustre. The once radiant Auror now blends into the background, her ability to entertain with a flick of her face extinguished. Through her, Rowling demonstrates how grief does not simply silence laughter, it also extinguishes self-expression. Interestingly, the recovery of Tonks's powers parallels the restoration of her hope. Once Lupin finally admits his love and chooses to be with her, her hair returns to its former vibrancy. Her Patronus solidifies again into its wolf shape, no longer weak, but a declaration of her devotion. This return illustrates how emotion functions as the foundation of her magic. The moment her heart finds stability, her gift flows once more. What the reader sees is a rare, almost psychological model of magic. Abilities bend and break under grief, and yet they also bloom again when love takes root. It is one of Rowling's clearest statements about the fragile but resilient connection between spirit and spell. The storytelling choice to use Tonks's ability as a barometer of emotion also contrasts powerfully with characters like Severus Snape. Snape carries an ocean of pain, but his mastery of magic is unaffected. His self-discipline isolates his suffering, converting it into skill with potions and curses. Tonks, by contrast, has no such armor. Her gift is tied to her heart, raw and exposed, and it fails her when she is wounded. The juxtaposition raises a haunting question about the nature of magic in the wizarding world. Is it merely technique and will, or is it a mirror of the self? In Tonks's case, it is clearly the latter. This small detail also expands the theme of vulnerability. Auras are trained to fight dark wizards, to stand against curses and mortal peril. Tonks herself is capable, brave, and loyal. Yet what incapacitates her is not a hex, but her own sorrow. Her magic falters not because of a duel, but because of unreturned love. This subtle narrative thread emphasizes that even the strongest witches and wizards are not invulnerable to the storms of the heart. In fact, it is love and grief, not curses, that most powerfully bend their world.